There comes a moment in every person's life when, without warning, something inside breaks. It's not sadness, it's not anger, it's something deeper. It feels as if the soul itself grows tired of carrying the weight of other people's expectations, of holding on to relationships that only drain, of trying to fit into spaces that no longer belong. It is in that moment that something profound happens, something Carl Jung described as the beginning of the true process of individuation, the breaking point where the mask falls and the authentic self begins to emerge. But what's curious is that this moment doesn't come with great announcements. There is no sign in the sky, no mark on the calendar that says, "Today is the day you will set yourself free." It doesn't arrive when you expect it, but rather when you need it the most. It comes after countless nights spent trying to convince yourself that things will get better, that maybe if you change, if you try harder, if you ignore that heavy feeling in your chest that screams something isn't right, then everything will finally fall into place. But it never does. It never fits. And then, in the middle of that emotional exhaustion, the decision happens. The decision to say, no more. For Jung, this moment is a call from the unconscious. It is not a whim, nor a simple emotional reaction. It is a deep message from the psyche, a silent scream that has been waiting for years to be heard. It is the beginning of a journey with no return, because once you decide to let go of what no longer belongs to you, once you dare to walk towards your authenticity, there is no turning back. The person you once were begins to fade, and in their place, someone new emerges, someone stronger, more conscious, more you. What many don't understand is that saying no more is not an act of rebellion, but an act of self-love. It is not an ending, it is a beginning. But why is it so difficult? Why, even when we know something is harming us, do we struggle to let go? Jung explained it in a way so clear that it hurts to accept, because we have built our identity around what makes us suffer. Maybe you haven't noticed, but for years you have told yourself the same story. You have justified your pain with phrases like, "That's just how things are. I can't do anything to change it. Maybe I deserve this. What if I end up alone?" Your unconscious has accepted these ideas as absolute truths, and in doing so, they have shaped your reality. You have stayed in relationships that don't add value, in jobs that kill your spirit, in dynamics that only exhaust you. And the worst part? A part of you has come to believe that this is normal, that this is just how life is. But it's not. Jung taught us that the soul is always seeking its own evolution, and that evolution requires shedding what no longer resonates with our authentic self. However, to do so, we must go through a painful but transformative process, the confrontation with the shadow. The shadow is everything you have repressed, the parts of yourself you were taught to hide, the desires, thoughts, and emotions you deemed unacceptable. But the shadow does not disappear just because you ignore it. On the contrary, it manifests in your life in subtle but constant ways, in the patterns you repeat, in the relationships that hurt you, in the anxiety you cannot explain. And here lies the crucial point. When you say no more, you are facing your shadow head-on. You are challenging the belief system that has kept you trapped. In a way, you are dying in order to be reborn. That is why it hurts. That is why it is so difficult. Because you are not just letting go of a person, a job, or a situation. You are letting go of a version of yourself. A version that has been with you for years, that has been your refuge, your excuse, your comfort zone. But it no longer serves you. It is no longer you. When you decide to let go, the unconscious reacts. At first, you will feel fear. You will doubt yourself. You will question whether you made the right decision. And it is at this point that many people retreat. But this is where you must remember something fundamental. Fear is not a sign that you are making a mistake. It is a sign that you are changing. The unconscious does not want you to change. Its function is to keep you in the known, the predictable. But the soul has a different plan. And this is where the real internal battle begins. The battle between the comfort of the old and the uncertainty of the new. But if you hold on, if you push through the initial chaos without looking back, something incredible happens. You begin to reclaim your energy. Jung described this as a kind of psychic rebirth. For years, your energy has been scattered, trapped in dynamics that did not allow you to grow. Every time you tolerated a situation you didn't want, you gave away a piece of your vitality. Every time you suppressed an emotion out of fear of rejection, you distanced yourself further from your essence. But when you make the decision to let go, all that energy returns to you. It is an almost magical process. What once seemed impossible suddenly becomes clear. What once hurt suddenly doesn't matter as much. And what you once thought you needed suddenly loses its meaning. But there is something else, something no one tells you, something you only discover when you go through this process. The self-love that emerges after saying no more is incomparable to any other form of love. It is a love that does not depend on external validation, that does not need approval. It is a love that is born from within, from the certainty that you are enough just as you are. And when you discover that, when you experience that level of love for yourself, your life changes forever. You stop looking outside for what has always been inside. You stop settling for crumbs because you finally understand your true worth. You stop waiting for someone else to save you because you realize that you have always had the power to save yourself. And there, at that point, is where everything begins to align. Not because the universe is rewarding you for making the right decision, but because, at last, you are in tune with what was always meant to be yours. Relationships change, paths open, opportunities appear. Not because you're doing something different, but because for the first time, you are truly being yourself. But this process doesn't end here. Because once you discover self-love, there is something else you must do, something that will determine the course of your entire life. When you begin to experience the self-love that emerges after saying, no more, something in your perception of the world shifts. You used to justify toxic behaviors, downplay red flags, and tolerate what deep down you knew wasn't right. But now, with a new awareness of yourself, you can no longer ignore what once went unnoticed. It's as if you've woken up from a long sleep, and for the first time, you see reality without filters. What once seemed normal now feels unbearable. The excuses you used to tell yourself no longer make sense. And this is where one of the deepest transformations takes place. You start seeing people for who they really are, not for who you wish they were. For years, you convinced yourself that if you tried hard enough, if you were patient enough, if you gave enough, you could change someone. You could make them see your worth. You could be so good, so understanding, so loyal that eventually you would receive the love and respect you deserved. But now you understand a fundamental truth. That was never your responsibility. No matter how much love you give, you cannot fill the void in someone who refuses to fill it themselves. Carl Jung explained that when a person has not integrated their shadow, the hidden parts of themselves they refuse to face. They project their internal conflicts onto others. This is why, in so many relationships, the same dynamics repeat over and over again. A person who hasn't confronted their own darkness will unconsciously seek someone who serves as a mirror, someone onto whom they can project their chaos. And if in the past you were that person, if you allowed someone to unload their wounds onto you without taking responsibility for them, it was because you hadn't yet realized something essential. You were never there to heal them. You were there to learn how to heal yourself. But when you say, "No more," when you refuse to continue in that cycle, something unexpected happens. The people who once controlled you with guilt, manipulation, or empty promises begin to reveal their true selves. Maybe they react with anger. Maybe they try to make you feel like you are the one who is failing. Maybe they tell you that you've changed. And the truth is, they're right. You have changed. You are no longer the person who tolerated the intolerable. You are no longer the person who stayed silent out of fear of losing love. Self-love is not a fleeting emotion. It is an internal foundation that, once built, becomes the base upon which you construct your entire life. But to solidify this love, you must face the hardest test of all, solitude. Because when you decide to let go of what no longer serves you, an emptiness is left behind. A space that was once filled with relationships, habits, and beliefs that, though painful, were familiar. And in that emptiness, in that uncertainty, fear appears. The fear that you made the wrong decision. The fear of being alone. The fear that you may never find something better. But this is where you must remember what Jung taught. The unconscious does not seek comfort. It seeks transformation. And transformation always involves a period of chaos before clarity arrives. During this process, it is normal for nostalgia to make you doubt. There will be moments when you miss what you left behind, not because you want it back, but because your mind has not yet adjusted to freedom. But that feeling of loss is only temporary, because deep down, there is one thing you know with absolute certainty. You could never go back to being the person you were before you woke up. And in that exact moment, something extraordinary happens. You start attracting something completely different, not because you are desperately trying to fill the void, but because now you vibrate at a different frequency. Jung said that what we experience in the external world is merely a reflection of our internal world. When you were broken inside, when you did not value yourself, you attracted people and situations that reinforced that belief. But now that you have recognized your worth, now that you understand that self-love is non-negotiable, everything changes. The people you once connected with no longer fit into your life, not because you chose to push them away, but because they no longer resonate with you. Situations that you once tolerated now feel intolerable. And instead of wondering if you are being too demanding, you realize that you are simply setting a new standard. You no longer accept less than what you deserve. Not because you think you are superior, but because you have finally become someone who respects themselves. And this is where many people fail. This is where they turn back. Because transformation is not a linear process. There are moments when you feel like you're making progress, and moments when it seems like you're regressing. But the key is not to let uncertainty pull you back into the past. The key is to trust that everything you are leaving behind was never meant to be permanent. The pain, the fear, the loneliness, they are not signs that you are lost. They are signs that you are growing. So, if today you feel like you are in the middle of the storm, remember this: the version of you that tolerated less, that made excuses, that settled, that version no longer exists. You are not lost. You are becoming. And that is the most powerful transformation of all. Jung believed that the greatest obstacle on the path to self-discovery is the fear of emptiness. And it's true, emptiness can feel overwhelming, even terrifying. But what no one ever taught us is that this void is sacred. It is the space where transformation begins. If you rush to fill it, if you cling to the familiar just to escape uncertainty, you will never uncover what was truly meant for you. That is why, after deciding to walk away, after freeing yourself from what was holding you back, the most important step is to embrace the void, to sit with it, to explore who you are without all the emotional baggage. Because something powerful happens when you resist the urge to fill the space with the first thing that comes along. Clarity emerges. That clarity that once felt out of reach, that deep realization that you don't need anything external to feel whole. And when you arrive at this understanding, when you finally grasp what it means to truly love yourself, life starts responding to you in ways you never imagined. You are no longer acting from scarcity, but from abundance. You no longer chase love. You radiate it. You no longer beg for attention. You naturally attract it. You no longer settle for the bare minimum, because now you recognize your worth. And that shift, that new version of you, begins to reshape everything around you. The people who enter your life are no longer looking to take advantage of you. They want to share in your energy. The opportunities that once seemed impossible now feel within reach, not because the world has changed, but because you have. And this is where true magic happens. Because when you become someone who genuinely loves themselves, when you fully embody this transformation, you don't just change your own life. You become a guiding light for others. You prove that letting go is possible, that renewal is real, that living in alignment with your truth is the only way forward. But this is just the beginning. Because once you awaken to this power within you, there is one final challenge to face: making this transformation permanent. When you step into the self-love that arises from saying no more, you experience a sense of freedom unlike anything before. But this is also when many people are tested, tempted to return to the past, not because they want the pain back, but because the unknown still feels unsettling. Your mind will try to trick you, replaying only the good moments of what you left behind, downplaying the suffering, whispering doubts like, "What if it wasn't that bad? What if I never find something better? What if I overreacted?" But now, you know the truth. You know that every time you excused your pain, you were only extending it. You know that every time you stayed where you weren't valued, you were denying yourself growth. And most importantly, you know that going back is no longer an option. The version of you that tolerated the intolerable no longer exists. Jung taught that every significant experience expands the human psyche. You cannot shrink back into your old self after waking up. Trying to do so would only create more suffering, because deep down, you no longer belong to that outdated version of yourself. And yet, life will test you. Maybe the person you walked away from will reappear. Maybe a familiar situation will return in a different disguise. But this time, you have something you didn't have before: awareness. When you commit to evolving, when self-love becomes your foundation, you develop a new skill: the ability to see the truth without deception. And the truth is simple. Anything that asks you to betray your peace does not deserve a place in your life. Any relationship that requires you to shrink yourself is not love. It is a cage disguised as companionship. This is where many people stumble, because they mistake attachment for love. They believe missing something means they still need it, when in reality, it's just the last traces of an old emotional habit fading away. Missing something does not mean you made the wrong choice. It means your mind is recalibrating. Your subconscious is shedding years of conditioning. The real proof of growth isn't in how much pain you feel after letting go. It's in what you choose to do with the emptiness that follows. If you fill it with the first thing that shows up, with something that only brings temporary comfort, you will find yourself trapped in the same cycles. But if instead you use this space to reconnect with yourself, to dig deeper, to align with your true desires, then you are preparing yourself for something completely new. Life responds to the energy you project. When you were broken, you attracted from a place of fear and need. But now that you have learned to be at peace within yourself, everything shifts. Relationships are no longer built on fear of loneliness, but on genuine connection. You no longer settle for the bare minimum because you no longer feel desperate for love. Now, what you give comes from wholeness, not emptiness, and the difference is profound. The most fascinating part of this journey is that once you stop searching outside for what has always been within you, everything changes. Everything begins to align naturally. Synchronicity, a concept Jung explored in depth, starts to manifest in your life. You no longer feel like you're swimming against the current because things simply flow. The answers you once searched for in desperation appear at just the right moment. The people who truly resonate with you start entering your life effortlessly. And most importantly, you are no longer afraid. Because when you truly understand your worth, when you have experienced the power of unconditional self-love, you realize that never again will you allow anyone to define you, to mold you, to make you feel inadequate. External validation becomes irrelevant because your internal validation is unshakable. This is the moment when transformation solidifies. You no longer need to prove anything to anyone. You no longer seek the world's acceptance because you have learned to accept yourself. You have integrated your shadow, understood your lessons, and now walk with a certainty you never had before. It's a level of peace that cannot be explained with words, only experienced. And here is where something interesting happens. When you change in this way, some people from your past will try to return, not because they have changed, but because they sense that they no longer have power over you. Where they once manipulated you, they now see that you are unbreakable. Where they once played with your emotions, they realize they can no longer shake your center. And this confuses them, not because you hate them, not because you seek revenge, but because now they see something in you that was always there, your power. The only difference is that now you recognize it too. Now you know who you are. Now you know what you deserve. And when you reach this point, there is no turning back, because you are no longer interested in proving anything. You no longer need to explain yourself. You no longer feel the urge to make others understand your worth. You simply are. And that is the greatest victory of all. Because when you reach this state of authentic self-love, life stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like creation. You are no longer trapped in cycles of suffering. You no longer repeat old wounds. Now, you consciously choose what you allow in your life, because you have understood that everything around you is a reflection of what you believe you deserve. And now, you finally know your worth. That is the true meaning of self-love. It's not about being perfect. It's not about never having moments of doubt. It's about knowing, with every fiber of your being, that you will never again settle for less than what you truly deserve. Because at the end of the day, it all comes down to a choice. Continue living according to the expectations of others, or dare to live the life you truly desire. The moment you fully understand your worth is the moment your life changes forever. It's as if you suddenly wake up from an illusion that kept you trapped in cycles of suffering, stagnant relationships, and a distorted concept of love. And when you realize that never again will you allow anything or anyone to make you doubt your worth, everything around you starts to shift. At first, it might feel strange. You are used to the struggle, to justifying the unjustifiable, to postponing your peace in the name of patience or the hope that things will improve. But now, in this new state of awareness, you can no longer betray yourself. You can no longer ignore the signs. And that makes you different. Not because your essence has changed, but because you have finally reconnected with it. The people who once knew you might say that you are no longer the same. And they are right. You are no longer available for the dynamics you once tolerated. You are no longer the person who justified the lack of reciprocity. You no longer try to fit into places where you are not welcomed, because now you understand that every time you ignored your intuition, you were choosing your own suffering. Carl Jung said that when we repress our truth, the unconscious finds ways to bring it to the surface. It can do this through dreams, physical symptoms, anxiety, or a persistent feeling of emptiness. For years, you ignored these signs, convinced that it was normal to feel that way. But now, you see it clearly. It was never normal to carry that emotional weight. It was never normal to stay where you were not valued. It was never normal to silence your intuition just to avoid making others uncomfortable. The difference now is that you have learned to listen. You have learned to recognize what your soul has been trying to tell you all along. And most importantly, you have learned to trust yourself, because that is the key. Self-love is not an empty concept or just a nice idea. It is trust. Trust that what you feel is valid. Trust that you deserve something better. Trust that you do not need to cling to what no longer nourishes you. When you become someone who respects themselves, life starts reflecting that respect back to you in every aspect. Not because you have become stronger in the traditional sense, but because you no longer settle for less than you deserve. And the most fascinating part? You don't even need to make a great effort for this to happen. It's an energy shift. When you raise your standards, when you no longer tolerate the intolerable, the people who once took advantage of your low self-esteem start to drift away on their own. They can no longer manipulate you. They can no longer use you as a dumping ground for their chaos. And if they try, they quickly realize you are not the same person anymore. This is where some people feel fear, not because they want to return to who they used to be, but because the emptiness left after letting go of toxicity can be intimidating. There will be moments when you question whether you made the right choice, but in those moments, the only thing you need to do is remember a simple yet powerful truth. Self-love doesn't feel like immediate euphoria. It feels like peace. That peace that once seemed unattainable. The peace you used to seek in others and now discover within yourself. A peace that no longer depends on what someone else does or doesn't do, because you now understand that the most important relationship you will ever have is the one you have with yourself. And that changes everything. Now, at this new level of awareness, the challenges don't disappear. The temptations to go back may still arise, but the difference is that now You can distinguish between what is real and what is merely an illusion of the past. You don't need to justify yourself. You don't need to explain. You don't need to convince anyone of your worth because you know it, you feel it, you live it. And here is where the real transformation happens. Because when you live from this space, when self-love has become your natural state, something incredible happens. You no longer seek to impress anyone. You no longer look for validation. You are no longer obsessed with being understood because you realize not everyone is ready for this transformation. Some people will say you've changed too much, that you are no longer the same, and they will be right. But what they fail to understand is that you haven't changed to fit a new mold. You've changed because you've finally broken free from one. When you live with self-love, your energy feels different. It's as if the things that used to affect you no longer have the same impact. You no longer react to manipulation. You no longer get dragged down by guilt. You no longer allow someone who doesn't know what they want to make you doubt what you do want. And that clarity, that certainty, is what finally gives you the power that was always within you. Life becomes simpler, not because challenges disappear, but because now you know which battles are worth fighting and which ones are not. You know you don't need to prove anything. You know that what is meant for you will come without forcing it. You know that what doesn't flow is not a challenge to conquer, but a sign that it's not your path. And when you reach this point, you realize something surprising. You no longer have any interest in going back. Because at the end of the day, everything comes down to one choice: to keep repeating patterns that only bring pain, or to dare to create an entirely new reality. You've already made your decision. Never again will you be the person who ignored their intuition. Never again will you settle for what doesn't serve you. Never again will you let anyone define your worth. Because now you understand something that will change your life forever. Self-love is not a destination, it's a journey. And now you are finally walking in the right direction. When you discover the self-love that emerges after saying, "No more," there is no turning back. What once felt like an internal battle now becomes absolute clarity. Uncertainty dissolves because you no longer need anyone to confirm your worth. You already know it. And here lies the key to everything. The world responds to the energy you project. Now that you have reconnected with yourself, now that you have learned to respect, honor, and release what no longer serves you, life begins to align with this new version of you. Because when you walk with certainty, when you have left behind the doubts and fears that once trapped you, everything authentic starts gravitating toward you. Maybe before, you struggled to understand why some people seem to move forward effortlessly while you felt stuck. But now you know the truth. It wasn't life that was against you. It was you who was holding on to what no longer had a place in your growth. Now you see it clearly. Now you understand that what was happening to you wasn't a punishment. It was a lesson. Now you realize that every relationship, every experience, every loss had a purpose: to lead you here, to this moment, where you finally recognize yourself, where you finally choose yourself, where you finally decide to live in harmony with who you truly are. And this is where true magic begins, because when you change, your environment changes. When you transform, the people who enter your life are different. When you raise your standards, the universe responds with opportunities, connections, and experiences that reflect your new level of awareness. And all of this starts with a single decision. The decision to never again accept less than what you deserve. Now that you have this clarity, I want you to do something. Don't keep this message to yourself. Share this knowledge with someone who needs it, with someone who is still trapped in the cycle you have already broken free from. Because what you've just heard is not just a reflection, it is a tool for transformation. Leave a comment below and tell me what part of this message resonated with you. I want to hear from you. I want to know what stage of this journey you are in and what you've learned from your own experience. And if this content has touched your soul, help me spread it to more people. Share this video, subscribe if you haven't already, and turn on notifications so we can continue growing together on this path of self-discovery and transformation. Remember, every time you engage with this content, you are not only helping yourself, you are also helping others receive this message at the moment they need it most. Together, we can build a community of people who have chosen to awaken, to leave behind what no longer belongs to them, and to move forward toward the life they truly deserve. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And most of all, thank you for daring to choose yourself. See you in the next video. Remember, the change starts with you.